So let's do a complete unknown.
Unknown. A complete unknown. Hello.
Let's do that again. Let's do that again.
We're going to Sundance this week.
Yeah.
That'll be really fun.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. The opportunity and fun times to travel. What first business trip, George?
Hey, congratulations.
Business.
Hey.
But terrified because the forecast is -17. I've seen -15.
Highs off.
So highs off.
Highs off.
Highs
minus
off.
17. We didn't even know what that is in Fahrenheit because we were talking to our American clients about it.
Yeah.
But you realise that you can't talk to Americans about weather necessarily because
You
of the
completely lose
different
the
system.
reference. Yeah.
Because they were like, oh, it's going to be -5. And they're like,
Yeah,
oh,
it was -32.
Yeah.
And you'll go, Jesus Christ.
Fun fact, -40 is the same in Celsius and Fahrenheit.
That's
the only time they cross
special
over.
relationship
Yeah.
exists for America
It's a
and US.
-40. Yeah, we are. We're going this week. We're really excited. Hopefully,
Cannot wait.
well, yeah, next week's episode should be from Utah itself.
Be interested to see
Utah.
where we find time and space to do that. But we will find time and space.
We will
to
find
do
time
it,
and
but it's
space.
Where, in what that
Why are you
capacity
talking about
that
Doctor
will
Who?
look like.
Well, we will find time and space.
Cracks and
yeah,
walls and
here we
time
go.
-17. We will find a place and time to do it, but I'll be interested to see how it looks.
Yeah, in my head,
It's like double take it outside.
Like,
we just
yeah,
frozen.
double take outside. No, we'd last about four minutes before it becomes Society of the Snow.
Yeah.
And then I think we hope that our hotel would have some sort of balcony of the mountains to look out to. But no,
Yeah,
I
that
think
would be cool.
We'll find a way.
We'll find a place to do it. 10-hour flight, 11-hour flight?
I think it's a 10-11-hour flight with a 7-hour time difference. I thought it was 7-hour time
Hefty.
difference. But it's fine. We got time
That's
either
a work
side.
day.
It
It's
is
a
a work
work day
day
difference.
And some good recovery time there. But James and I are very excited, and we're excited to share it with you all. Our trip to the
Stay
Sundance
tuned.
Film Festival. Sundance Film Festival started in the 1970s by Robert Redford as a venue for independent films outside of the studio system, and called Sundance Film Festival because he played Sundance in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There you go.
I love that.
A little bit of knowledge.
Maybe
for you.
we'll have a Sundance podcast reef at the start of our podcast, as seen in Sundance.
Yeah,
And
like you do
we'll
on the
just get more-
trailers.
and we'll just get more people to come and listen to it because go, well, official selection.
Official selection, yeah, one of the podcasts that featured.
One of the
There you.
podcasts,
Also, James, we haven't marked it on the show, but we should by cheersing your iced coffee with my mug of Lemsip because I'm sickly. And so is James,
yes,
actually.
we're
We're both a
both
bit
sick.
Excuse the sniffles this week. But happy 10-year anniversary. I met you 10 years ago.
Is it?
Well, basically, I know it's today, but it's like...
Yes, 'cause it was- it
was
would
the
have been winter
beginning of the
rehearsals.
spring term for 2015. Do you remember? Because we're still in the hype cycle.
10
for-
years. You're
10
an
years.
old friend of mine.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Because 5 years ago, I'd have been like, yeah, George, he's like a uni friend.
Yeah.
I would have compartmentalized
Oh,
you there,
wow,
for
yeah.
better or worse. But like, I have like my old friends.
stuck around.
And uni friends. And now I could be like, yeah, I mean, how do you know George? God, I've known George for a long time, since uni.
10 years. Well, this is what's happening with some of my school friends because they're like, oh, how long have you known so-and-so? And I'll go, Christ, nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
20
I have like friends who've like not like close friends of mine, but people who I see quite often who joined my school in year 3 and we rode it all the way to the end. And someone was like, oh yeah, like how do you know this guy? And I was like, yeah, I've known him since I was 6.
Wow.
And then we both just looked at each other like, damn, I've known you my
Yeah.
whole life. You were in this core of people. There's like an original 40 who joined my school in the junior branch. And then obviously the years got larger as it went on. There's like an original 40 people that I'm like, I've just known you my whole life. Might not be my best friends, but like, you have that shared experience having gone and done
Like
the
in
same
Band of
things.
Brothers, where like he was one of the recruits that started. They made it through the whole war.
Yeah.
Instead
of a war, though, it was like
it was
finger painting.
Yeah, exactly. Nice school. I don't.
It wasn't finger painting at 6. It was times tables and stuff. But
I don't think I'm friends with anyone, or still really in contact with friends with anyone I knew prior to the age of 13.
wow, that's really interesting.
Just because and that's fine.
Because you changed schools. at that
I
age,
changed
yeah.
schools at 13. People move on.
That's common,
We
yeah.
all changed schools.
Yeah.
The school finished. We all changed schools. We moved on.
Yeah.
And everyone does different things, and you change as well
Yeah.
when you become a teenager. You go to a new school.
Yeah.
The hormones kick in.
Yeah.
It's
New
all
location.
happening.
So I have a weird thing. My best friend Max, I don't
Yes.
remember meeting him. I gained consciousness and Max was there. And our friendship is based on a lot of things being done right. Like same school,
Yeah.
tick, all the way through. We live a 5-minute drive from each other's houses, tick,
Yeah.
convenient play date. Our oldest sisters were friends, double play
Yeah.
date. You've got like Arsenal fans, tick.
Yeah.
Jewish, tick. It's like all of these things align. It was like it was never not going to happen.
Yeah, you're right. That's nice.
But I didn't choose him. It's like he was just around.
He was destined.
I didn't, make him my friend. I wasn't like I like this guy. I knew what my name was, and Max was.
Do you know what? It's good that you got on because it'd be really hard to avoid him otherwise.
Imagine if he was terrible. No.
Every Arsenal game, you'd see him.
Yeah.
Every time your sisters would hang out, you'd see him.
Bloody Max.
Max over there. Yeah.
So I realised not a lot of people have that. So I'm very lucky to have an old lifelong friend like that. But
so really, compared to the rest of your friends, I'm actually still in the younger category.
Yeah, you're nothing to me.
10 years is entry level. It's like, oh well done.
If I just sort of got rid of you and cut you out, I'd be like, yeah, that was an interesting blip in my life.
Didn't you do like a whole thing? Didn't you fly to Sundance and stuff? Barely remember it.
If that. Was he there?
Was it who? One day in the future, you'll be smoking. You don't smoke, but you'll be smoking a cigarette at a bar and go, George Bunneck. Haven't heard that name in a long time.
That's a name I've not heard in a long time.
Welcome to episode 164 of Pulp Kitchen. Last week, we reviewed... This is always the hardest thing we do every episode.
What the hell we do.
What we did last week.
I struggle to talk about what we do like today sometimes. Oh, right, okay. Like, what did we do today? I'm like, we did that.
Because it hasn't gone through the processing in the brain yet to get to the actual data bank.
The brain hasn't actually... It's still in reception.
Yes.
It needs to be taken up to its
warehouse room. It's still in the lobby.
Yeah.
Last week, in episode 163, we... reviewed.
You edited it.
I edited it. We reviewed Baby Girl, and My Old Ass,
yes.
and A Little Bit of a Real Pain as well. Go check that out if you haven't done it already. But today it's a big Oscar contenders week.
Oh, George, great week to be a Pulp Kitchen listener.
If you want to have your finger on the pulse of the awards season, this week is the week for you because we are not only reviewing The Brutalist, one of the most talked about films of the season, we are also interviewing director Brady Corbet, and we are also reviewing Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown.
Huge week.
Massive.
And that's all I want to say. And we've been sitting on our Brutalist review for about just over a month now,
yes,
maybe.
We've seen it for a while
we got
ago.
the opportunity to see it early, which was fantastic, but we wanted to just time the review in time with its release and the awards hype to make it sort of a little bit more relevant for you guys. Because sometimes we've obviously got our ears to the pulse. You guys might see that a month before it's out and go, well, what ear to the pulse? And you might go, what the hell is a Brutalist? I don't know what is this. But now you can see the buzz. I think that hopefully brings our review a little bit more attention from you guys.
And able to tie the director in as well, which is always great.
Absolutely, which is really
we feel very blessed to have had that. We did actually end up getting 10 minutes with
which
Brady.
is very cool. We had a hot 8, which was
we were
stretched.
promised 8. We were the last interview of the day.
I think, and we was trying. This is what's funny. It's like Brady Corbet, bless him. He was really great, by the way. Listen to it, but he was obviously doing interviews all day. We actually got a call from PR to ask us to come and do it an hour earlier because I think they were finishing up. As we walked into the room, Brady Corbet had stood up and looked like he was on his way out.
I think he thought he was done.
And then we walked in and he was like, oh, hello, and like shook our hands and then sat back down to do the last 10 minutes. So bless him. I think he thought it was a wrap on him.
Yeah, no. And honestly, like, he gave us a great 10 minutes. You'll hear this in a second. But like the second that we were done, his arse was off that seat, about to look away. And we said goodbye and we left. And as we were leaving, I heard him say to his PR person, his publicist, like, I'm going to run away now, okay? Because he's been in that hotel for 8 hours.
Talking about his film, which he's been thinking about and doing nothing. He's probably talked about nothing else for 3 years.
Think about it. He's doing 6 different conversations every hour. So, in a day, that's just a crazy amount of stuff.
So please look forward to that. That would be great. And we, speaking of things, Patreon, George.
Yeah, speaking of the awards season, we just recorded our latest weekly episode, Double Take, our exclusive episode for Patreon, where we talked about the BAFTA nominations, which were revealed just before we went and spoke to Brady Corbet.
Reacted to those, gave some of our picks.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about David Lynch passing away, honouring a major director, and
also reacted to James Cameron yapping on about Avatar 3, Daredevil Born Again trailer, lots of fun. TikTok being banned in the US for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Not necessarily film news, but just interesting stuff. It's a great space, guys. If you want to hear a little bit more from us, it is our exclusive Patreon news show. We did it in the shivering cold just because we want it to look different to this and feel different. It should have
completely
different energy
ill-advised
to
when we're both ill.
Yeah,
but
nonetheless, we did it for you guys anyway. So you can get access to that and all episodes of Double Take, of the Brutalist, of Double Take on our Patreon. If you sign up now, you'll have how many episodes? 30 plus.
At least. Almost over half a year's worth of great news.
So it's never been more value to sign up than today. And if that is the best way to support us, if you want to do that as well, you also get to listen to this show ad-free and there's other perks. So make sure you check it out.
Thank you, guys. Well, without further ado, let's sink our teeth into some interesting awardsy films.
And before we talk about that, later this week, I've gone to see Wolfman.
Oh, yes.
Wolfman.
Oh.
Wolfman. In the poster, it's like there's wolf, 2 characters, and then man.
I would
So there's
say
a
Wolfman.
space. Yeah.
It's a universal property, isn't it? Like the Wolfman. Wolfman.
The Wolfman.
Wouldn't say, hi, I'm Bill Wolfman. It's not the
Wolfman.
Wolfman.
You should watch the film. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to check that review out, that's coming later this week.
On with the show.
Let's do it.
So let's do A Complete Unknown, the new Bob Dylan biopic starring Timothée Chalamet and directed by James Mangold, who's a fairly like one of those kind of journeyman Hollywood directors, a bit like a Ron Howard, who is a fairly safe pair of hands, does things like Ford versus Ferrari, Walk the Line, Logan, The Wolverine, Copland, Girl Interrupted. He did the Dial of Destiny, the Indiana Jones movie. So he kind of oscillates between always big budget studio movies, but sometimes like dramas, but sometimes like IP, like superhero, whatever. A Complete Unknown, which has been in production for about 5 years, actually, interrupted by COVID and then the writers' strike, and it was only shot about this time last year in January. This is about Bob Dylan, but specifically 5 years of Bob Dylan's life between 1961 and about 1965. And there are many, many chapters in Bob Dylan's career that you could focus on, but this is his sort of beginnings and building towards a sort of major moment in his career and indeed musical history and musical culture. Obviously, I'm assuming that everyone knows who Bob Dylan is. Major American singer-songwriter, regarded as one of the best lyricists of all time, and still going today, even though his voice sounds even more like shoe leather today than it did 60 years ago.
Like raspy singing is caught up.
Oh,
it?
yeah. And all the cigarettes and the black coffee, like it doesn't, A Complete Unknown takes place, like I said, we begin in 1961, where a young Bob Dylan, originally Robert Zimmerman from Hibbing, Minnesota, is in a icy cold New York looking for Woody Guthrie. And Woody Guthrie, along with Pete Seeger, who in this movie is played by Edward Norton, are kind of the leading figures in the American folk music movement. And Dylan wants to find Woody Guthrie, wants to pay tribute to him, and in so doing, he meets Pete Seeger, and Pete Seeger kind of takes him under his wing and allows him to grow and fosters this young talent up. And to contextualize what's happening at the time is that folk music is kind of booming in line with the kind of countercultural movement in the 1960s with the social upheaval. You have a time where it's the civil rights movement. The war in Vietnam is gearing up. You've got Kennedy coming into office. You have Kennedy being assassinated.
Cuba as well.
Cuban Missile Crisis, exactly. And the folk music was tied into this sort of countercultural reaction to that, campaign for nuclear disarmament, civil rights. And in terms of music at that time, Elvis had been the huge, massive, the first ever pop star, but he was a pop star. He was for the kind of establishment. He was cookie cutter. He was polished. He was the studios that were putting him forward. And what folk music and the counterculture didn't have is their own Elvis. They didn't have their own figurehead. They didn't have someone to push this forward. And there was a real passion about folk music because it was music for the people, by the people. And Pete Seeger kind of recognizes in Bob Dylan not only his immense talent, but someone who could also be a figurehead for folk music in America. You also have Monica Barbaro playing Joan Baez, another leading figure in the folk music movement who has her kind of interest and competition with Bob Dylan at this time. And we sort of jump from underground clubs all around Greenwich Village. And it's a time period that's been explored. Inside Llewyn Davis is the most obvious one. And if you remember Inside Llewyn Davis, this isn't a spoiler, it's a very minor thing, but towards the very end of Inside Llewyn Davis, he's getting kicked out of a bar and he's seeing Bob Dylan about to come on stage or even playing on stage with his guitar.
Also visually, the silhouette of a struggling artist in a t-shirt and underpants crashing on someone's sofa in an American flat with the sun bursting through. Like there are visual similarities to Inside Llewyn Davis I really enjoyed.
You also have Sylvie Rousseau, who is a character played by Elle Fanning, who is not a musician, but an artist, teacher, who meets Bob Dylan, is interested in music, and is loosely based off of a real-life character with a different name. And Bob Dylan finds himself in this sort of mixture. And also what's happening is that, just to contextualize with the folk music thing as well, there's this fear of British invasion bands, what we call British invasion. Bands like the Kinks and bands like the Beatles. The Beatles hadn't yet won America. They weren't regarded as a band in their own right. It was seen as an invasion, a threat. And it's this idea of fighting to find your own voice in an America that is very young and new. that's the kind of the setup of it. That's the kind of period of time. And like I said, it builds towards a moment in music history that's very famous. Played by Timothée Chalamet, singing his own songs. He wasn't originally going to sing music, but because the production took so long, he actually got to the point where he thought, I think I can do this. I think probably after Wonka, he thought I can give my vocal cords a go. He was given, I believe, up to like 12 hours worth of unreleased Bob Dylan material to just listen to that no one else has listened to. Bob Dylan, I think, is maybe listed as an executive producer on the show, on the film. Never met Timothée Chalamet, offered script notes, but Bob Dylan himself is a sort of mercurial, mythic character, so sort of dropped in and out. So Chalamet had never got the chance to meet him. So I will hand over to you, James. Sorry, weaving in and out as well is Johnny Cash, played by an unrecognisable Boyd Holbrook.
Genuinely unrecognisable.
Genuinely unrecognisable.
Not like we say that word quite a lot. I genuinely it didn't click for me for a while until the credits came. I was like, of course it's Boyd Holbrook.
And he, of course, James Mangold directed Walk the Line, which is about Johnny Cash. And Johnny Cash kind of weaves in and out in a really interesting way. It kind of reminded me. Have you seen True Romance? No. It's Elvis appears like that in a spiritual form to Christian Slater's character, and it's a bit like that in this. Johnny Cash kind of weaves in and out at key moments of Dylan's life. Anyway, like I said, they're singing the songs for themselves. It's the 60s. A lot is happening. James.
That's a great intro. Before we start, I just want to say, jackets, jeans, sunglasses,
gorgeous
outfits. Yeah. Fantastic.
It really chic the struggling artist vibe in Greenwich
If
Village.
anything, George, it distracted me. Just like, I'm loving this brown suede button down. Where would I find a nice jacket that? And those glasses, are those like retired Jack Mary Majors from the 1960s? Who knows? But just want to admire the aesthetic capturing of the 60s itself. I thought the representation of New York City in the 60s was very well done. A couple of really nice wide shots that established that period of time, to which period of time is really important in this film. So I think coming into this, I was a little bit skeptical given the fact it's a musical biopic. I've made my thoughts quite clear on the oversaturation of Timothée Chalamet and how I just genuinely, I acknowledge him as being one of the great actors working today. And he's probably I said this on Double Take, he is the biggest movie star right now, holding it up to everyone else. And I was a little bit concerned that, especially in a biopic where he is going to be singing and doing what could have been an impressionistic performance, I think I was reassured definitely about halfway through that he is just so brilliant in this, and he has such a wonderful grasp of Bob Dylan's voice and his character, and that all of that prep time I think really shows in this film, and it's so great to see that. I think there are times when I thought the film might have been a little bit slow, but that finale, that ending, that sequence where I really felt like I was witnessing an intersection of musical history itself really elevated it for me above other musical biopics, because everything you just said in your intro means that this film is about so much more than just the star in question. It is about America in a phase of transition. It is about a piece of musical history. I really felt like it was about watching something develop, the death of folk music, the birth of rock, or the threat of rock and roll in some ways. And I was like, this serves more to its audience than just playing the greatest hits of Bob Dylan. That for me really elevates it. You said it could have chosen any of those periods to focus on Bob Dylan's life. I like that it committed to this window of 4 to 5 years. I think Edward Norton's really great and gives a wonderfully delicate and emotional performance. Chalamet really is very, very, very good in this. So I think I had such a beaming time towards the end of it, and I really was reassured that this was a film worth seeing and a story worth telling, and not just let's cycle through the top 10 best music artists whose story haven't we told yet. It served itself more than just a musical biopic. So for me, it's a really great success, and I really enjoyed it.
I agree. I think I loved it. And actually, the more I come away with it, the more I love it. It's kind of resonated really with me. It's really stuck with me. Bizarrely, some of it I almost find quite poignant, because, as you say, that third act is really interesting because it's getting to a point where once Dylan is an established celebrity, it's getting to this really kind of tragic idea, really, that sometimes you have to kill the person you are to become the person you want to be, and there is a metaphorical death that he's toying with. And I really liked that. I think
to feel the pressure of like pop culture on your
and your shoulders,
your music,
and also if you're just bigger than a genre, if you're just a talent in of itself, and they actually lay a seed for it early on when he's listening to the radio with Pete Seeger, and he's like, "Oh, I like this song," and Pete Seeger says, "Yeah, but music's all no bells and whistles. It's better if it's just a man and a guitar and it's just the story." And Dylan's like, "Well, music's music in a way, like if it sounds good." Yeah, I think it's Timothy's best performance, actually. And or at the very least, I think it is a new chapter of his career. Because, don't get me wrong, he always delivers.
Yes.
But there's something about his performance in this that I really do see how invested he is.
It's like accomplished and
He
discerning,
really,
isn't it?
he's locked in and engaged with being Dylan. And I see that. And I think he deserves all the merits that he's rightfully being recognised in the right fields for it. But I agree. The other performances, Edward Norton is this, delicate, very sort of sweetly kind Pete Seeger, but he has his own agenda as well.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I think Elle Fanning is terrific in this. A really delicate, kind of heartbreaking performance. And there's some moments of real intimate timidity in her. And fragileness to her that I think, oh goodness, it really breaks my heart.
Emotional complexity in their relationship as well.
Totally. And did you know they painstakingly recreated that apartment? That apartment was Bob Dylan's apartment, and everything from the Olivetti typewriter to his like plush doll and this like was Dylan's as it was at the time. Yeah. Not something that's necessary material to the film, but just knowing about that is really interesting. I think Monica Barbaro is great as well as Joan Baez, like I said, and I think another thing that helps it as a biopic is that it's prepared to be upfront about the fact that Dylan as a character in this can be difficult, can be terse, is talented,
contrarian, complex relationship with fame.
Yeah, it does not necessarily treat the people in his life the best way, but that is fine. And actually, when he's in that kind of dark glasses on, struggling with fame, I found that interesting because we were already informed by the stakes of what was happening. It didn't feel like the generic milestone in a biopic where it was like, oh, now they're famous and they're really struggling with it. There's the attention to detail of the period is really great. There's a bit where when he is now famous that he's walking through Greenwich Village and he's hearing all the different kinds of music in the village. And he's kind of thinking about where it puts him, and he's hearing echoes of basically like a Bob Dylan knockoff coming from the basement of one band. He walks past like some pot smokers and the kind of songs they're playing. There's a guy who's playing bongo drums, and he's hearing it all, and he ends up picking up this whistle from the street vendor, and it's like you can see his mind at work. And I really appreciated how often the film didn't want to tell you so much. It was trying to show you, which is in a good way. And like I said, for a director, I'm kind of on the fence about. I think James Mangold did a really good thing. I think when the songs are played, they really hit. Each time I thought, damn, that works. And you know what? That's a good song. That's a good song, Bobby.
It was a real pleasure to be in the film's company. And if you like music, and especially Bob Dylan, the music really stands for itself instead of like shoehorning in a story around the song. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like let this moment and this, like when he goes to sing to Woody Guthrie for the first time, that's a really sweet and tentative moment. And then you get to play a song of his as part of that. I'm like, yes, perfect. Pleasure to be in its company.
Stitched him really, really well. And I think that's it. I think it's that's why I came away with it. It's more than just. It looks like a glossy studio biopic, but it is more than that because it has focus. It grounds you in the stakes. It's got great performances, and like I said, I think that's what elevates me. I accept that I would say there's probably a slight bagginess to the middle section, but
it makes up for it.
It makes up for it because that last third act. The stakes, it feels tense.
Yeah,
you really feel like there's a fork in the road here, and you don't know which. I mean, we do know which way it goes, but like you feel invested in the moment.
And really important people in musical history, like Johnny Cash is knocking around, and he's there, and the agents and the chaos. It was just brilliant, and it felt like even though it was not a huge arena, but a small stakes venue, you felt like it was a turning point for culture itself. And
I actually really love. I'm not going to say it, but the last sort of shot of the film where it's kind of Bob Dylan moving towards the next chapter of his career. I was like, I like the way that's done. You've kind of taken this kind of mythic figure and you've played it out in a way.
You get to do the maths in your own head for how that would go on versus it showing you. I like that.
So I locked in with. I'm a Dylan fan, so I was predisposed to liking it. And there are little Dylan Easter eggs. So when he picks up that whistle from the street vendor, I was like, oh, that's where he gets the thing from. Okay, that's the thing. And when she finds lyrics in his book and all that stuff. But I was won over about it. I'm glad you enjoyed it too. I think it's great.
It's especially clicked in for the last part for me. Just brilliant. And it's like it left me with so much more to think about. And it talked about media and music and pop culture was becoming globalized, and you were now being influenced by other countries' art. Like that's such interesting. Like folk music is an inherently American musical type, and now you've got rock and roll and electric and technology coming in and changing it. I had a conversation with someone about this. Is about something completely different but relevant, and it was about like the proliferation of media and social media in particular. We would talk about people who are our age, who grew up in the 90s and noughties, and this absolute sort of reverence we had for American culture, and like for us it would have been like sweets, clothes, television, movies. And as social media has become so prolific, and we're seeing America live on social media, are like complete, like, you know, we're not so much in awe of American culture as I think we were. It's so much more accessible to us than even in the 90s and noughties. That sense of like globalized ideas, it was just become more and more where like America isn't, I don't wonder about America as much as I think I definitely did when I was a kid.
Totally, yeah.
And that, I think it's the fact that's being stretched. You look at the 60s and like, hey, we've got radio, we've got television, Elvis just is now happening. You see that effect happening in the reverse. But
Yeah,
I think
there's a wider conversation about sort of like the decline of the sheen of America.
Yes.
Especially for the last like 30 years.
Today, Donald Trump is being sworn in for the second time.
At the time we're recording,
yeah.
No statement about that?
No, it's just a statement of fact.
And and there's that kind of that tragic element I'm talking about. There's a scene between Bob Dylan and Timothy Chalamet and Elle Fanning towards the end that I think I was like, yeah, that really, there is a great sort of understanding there of having to really, it is a metaphorical death of something. Anyway, that's a complete unknown. We'd love to hear people's thoughts to hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com.
And we'll read them back on a future episode of the show.
Yeah.
The film is out now.
The film is out?
Yeah, so...
it came out in the States, actually, like, I think at Christmas time.
Oh, wow,
so it's been out for a while there, but we recommend it. Thumbs up from us.
Yeah,
I think
we'd love to hear your thoughts.
We were won over because I was like I was thinking, here we go,
and I was like, oh, Chalamet's coming back again with it, which will likely be a very big performance, but he's very calmly put me at ease there. Yeah, he is a movie star in every single way. Yeah, and a long career he will have for sure.
That was a complete unknown. Called that because he is a complete unknown. So can I just, that's the other thing as well. No, just also like, he's coming into this folk music scene, which is gathered around New York. He's this nobody from Minnesota. Oh, Missouri. Sorry, it might be Missouri. Okay. And he's just, he's got no identity. Yeah. And he comes in with no direction home, a complete unknown, like from the song. Anyway, like a Rolling Stone. That was Bob Dylan.
So guys, as we said at the top of the episode, we last week got the chance to speak to the director of The Brutalist and writer and producer of The Brutalist, Brady Corbet. We were meant to have 8 minutes, we got 10. We were his last interview of the day. We just wanted to put that conversation here before our review of The Brutalist for you guys to enjoy. We got to talk to him about a load of interesting things, which you'll enjoy now.
I think just before we jump in, a quick summary of just maybe where the Brutalist finds stuff. We will explain the plot in more detail after the interview, but just essentially, it is set after the Second World War in America. We follow Hungarian Jewish architect emigre Laszlo Toth, played by Adrian Brody, who comes to America, goes to Philadelphia to start his new life. It's kind of about the American dream, and in so doing, encounters the very, very wealthy Van Buren, played by a wonderful Guy Pearce. He also has his wife, Felicity Jones, still back in Hungary, that he communicates with. So there you go. Here is Brady Corbet.
Well, Brady, thanks so much for speaking to us today. My name is James. This is George. We're from a podcast called Pulp Kitchen. Just want to say, first of all, congratulations on the BAFTA nominations that just got announced today.
Thank you very much. We're really touched.
Also, welcome to London. Welcome to the UK, which is home to many iconic pieces of Brutalist architecture.
Sure thing.
I want to begin by saying what I really liked about the film is that before I did this job, I actually worked in architecture for 7 years, and I was always looking out for a film about an architecture, and there's actually very few and far between. So I was really delighted to see this film come along.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that I try not to read very much stuff, because even the good stuff gets kind of in your head, and it's better just not to consider it too much, positive or negative. But Daniel Libeskind, the extraordinary architect behind One World Trade and the Jewish Museum in Berlin, wrote an extraordinary piece on the film. And it was probably the most validating thing I'd ever read about anything I'd ever worked on. So I'm happy it's mostly resonating with architects. Yeah. It's not resonating with architectural critics. But but it's interesting. But it is resonating with architects, and I think that's quite interesting.
Do you have a particular space or a place or building in particular that inspires you or stuck with you?
It's a little bit hard to say. I mean, I wouldn't really know where to start because there's a lot of stuff that I like for, very, very different reasons. My uncle attended Taliesin West and lived with me when I had a single mother and I was an only child, and he lived with us while he was attending Taliesin. So, of course, for my family from the Midwest, Frank Lloyd Wright, sort of is a very, very important figure. I mean, my personal favorite, is Peter Zumthor. And I have been to many of Peter's buildings, not all of them, but they are masterpieces, and for me, it doesn't get better than that.
So I know you shot this film on VistaVision, and we both really enjoyed the presentation of this film, and when we left the screening, we couldn't quite place it at the time, but it was just really individual and distinct and striking, and I just want to ask you, what was it like shooting on VistaVision? I know it's been sort of
it felt to me like a great privilege. The thing sounds like a sewing machine. So it's like a muscle car or something. I mean, it's there. But there's something interesting that it does also occasionally for the performers, where everyone just has to be sort of on point because, when you're shooting VistaVision, you're shooting twice as much film, or technically about 2.1 or 2.2 times as much, depending on the perforation. And so it's very valuable, and you literally hear the money, burning. And so it's interesting because those moments when you're capturing a performance, it's like capturing sunlight in a box. Like it's just this thing where there's this extraordinary focus because it's not disposable. And in a period of time with the democratization of the image and iPhones and everything just being so accessible, there are pros to that, but there are cons as well, because of course that has sort of devalued the process of image making to some extent. And so I think that, that audiences beyond aesthetic reasons, there is something that happens when a film is shot on film, even if it's shot, with a very regular exposure, and there's not a lot of grain, and it goes for a cleaner, let's say more digital look, or what we would associate with a digital look today, and yet you still feel something. It's like an aura about it, and I think that that there's, for lack of a better term, there's a certain je ne sais quoi about it that's just omnipresent, and every image feels a bit more significant because when you turn it on, you have a lot at stake and you got more to lose, and so you choose wisely. And when you call action, everyone is like, stands to attention, and I think that it does something, and but of course it also looks better, so there's that.
One thing I really enjoyed in the film is the kind of parallel between the process of architecture and the process of filmmaking. And one sort of idea that came to me was that it seems that the process of being creative, the creative act, is not so much is not just only about getting things created, getting things made, but it's also like the fight for control over it, the fight to stay true to one's vision. Is that something you've experienced as a filmmaker yourself, and did that feed into the Brutalist?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll probably experience that for the rest of my life, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends that are designers and architects, and when we compare notes, we have a lot of similar experiences. So that, of course, fed into what the movie became. And it was not written as a metaphor, or a visual allegory from my own personal experience. Like, obviously, I didn't emigrate to America from Bremerhaven in 1947. But, there are certain details that I'm intimately familiar with, and the sort of tug of war between art and commerce is something that is a factor for all artists that have a discipline that requires financing. I think that, there's only a handful of meaning. It's not like painting a painting. It's not like writing and recording a song in your bedroom. It is something that unfortunately, even a low budget movie, it still costs millions of dollars. And so it is a frequently frustrating process where, you know, people that have never written anything, they've never made anything, think that they know better than a lot of folks around them that have, you know, produced a lot of work. So I find that a little bit strange. I certainly wouldn't walk into someone's kitchen and tell them how to fucking cook. So I just think it's a little odd. But you know, in general, you know, on this movie in particular, we had really amazing partners, and so it was kind of the antidote to a lot of prior experiences that I'd had that were, you know, negative.
It's interesting to talk about like the film itself being precious and changing the tone of the film. The materials of what's being used to make the building is finite and expensive, and those things kind of link it quite nicely. That's quite
yeah, no, that's absolutely
behind the camera thing there.
Well, the thing about architecture, and I've said it before, but you know, it's difficult. The reason that there's so few films on architecture is that architecture is inanimate. It is very difficult to make a film which simply presents architecture. Yeah. You have to represent architecture. And with this film especially, you know, it was constantly on our mind, how can we sort of, you know, mimic the imposing scale of those brutalist monuments, and that no one asked for, and yet there they are, and they're, you know, they're real treasures that to this day are still controversial and divisive, and you know, I suppose I relate to that because I make films that people have a similar response to.
Yeah. I just want to ask you have an intermission in this film, and it really highlighted how the film is almost in two halves, both literally and its themes. One half being this promise of the American dream, and the other half being this almost crashing down to reality and a warning. Did you always want to structure your film in this way thematically, or is that something you found later?
No, I think that, you know, there was definitely a decision that, you know, the first half of the film is American optimism, and the second half of the film is pessimism. And people really connect with the first half of the film, especially because it makes them feel good. And then the second half of the film is much more divisive, but that's what makes it really interesting. And, you know, it's a very unique object because I'm not interested in homage or pastiche. You know, what I am interested in is having one foot very firmly, you know, planted in the traditions of the past, and then one foot that is very firmly planted, you know, in the present. And that tension I find inherently compelling. And, you know, I don't want to make, you know, homage pictures, and I understand there's a lot of great ones and stuff from filmmakers that I like and really enjoy, but for me, I want to be adding something to the conversation. But for me, the especially right now, when those traditions have been, you know, sort of devalued, let's say. I think it's important, you know, as we're moving forward, to also make sure that we, you know, pull some of that sack along with us, you know, because otherwise we're going to lose it. We're going to lose. I mean, can you imagine if you went to a museum and there were no paintings that were painted with oil anymore? I mean, that's insane. And so, of course, you know, we had, you know, a perfect technology that, you know, that we didn't need an antidote for. So, you know.
Unfortunately, Brady, we're out of time, but thank you very much for talking to us
about
this.
No worries.
Brutalism as a movement never seemed to get its flowers in the time, but this film definitely seems to be, so congratulations.
Well, that's very nice. I hope that it helps, you know, brutalist monuments all over the world. I hope it helps people, you know, come to appreciate them a little bit more.
We could have definitely done this for at least an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you much for your time. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
And there you go. So that was our conversation with Brady Corbet. Lovely guy.
Nice,
Clearly has just been soaking up all of the different things to do with his film. Great to ask him about VistaVision and cameras. I really particularly liked his comment, which is said by a lot of filmmakers, but you really felt that to be true of this, which is that when you shoot on film and when you shoot on a film stock that is precious and limited, it means that everybody else really switches on. And I think I could always see that in the film. And this film was made for like less than $10 million, which blows my mind. I can't remember reviewing a film that's cost less than that.
we've probably
outside of horror, like maybe some small horror.
I think we've probably done some small indies that have been like that. But like
when you see that
for a film
how
that
much
looks this good,
shot on film
Yeah.
over such a like long run time, it did sort of like surprise me that it didn't have like maybe like a 5 times.
also for the price of the talent as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, they must be doing it for the love of the game. Yeah, literally. But just to refresh us, that we're going to be talking about The Brutalist. Brady Corbet co-wrote this with his wife, Mona Fastvold. It's a period drama set in the 1940s, just after the Second World War. Follows the story of Laszlo Toth, who is a Hungarian Jewish architect who we pick up with him just after he has survived the Holocaust, approaching New York City as an immigrant. We're greeted with this inverted, warped perspective of the Statue of Liberty from like the back side of it. It's quite interesting. We're not then treated to the obvious wide scape of New York in the 1940s. It's very boots on the ground from there. We don't. It sort of holds his perspective in a way. It's confusing and strange. There's engine noise, and then we're straight into it.
And it's like instead of getting the wide shot of New York, as you said, this guy said, we're given a room full of immigrant faces in Ellis Island,
processing,
waiting
Ellis
to be processed,
Island coming through, translators and documents and writing your name down. Ellis Island's a really fascinating place to go if you haven't. Have you been to Ellis Island?
I typed in, did you do your name?
Yeah,
on
I
the
did
thing?
a name,
Really
yeah.
interesting. That's
really
when
fun.
I realised that my, tangent here, that my surname is probably perhaps a corruption of a different name.
Yeah.
Do you think? Because I only found 6 of Pundex. But
Yeah,
you
we
changed
have
one to
Briefles and Briffles and Brifles spelt it all different ways with different numbers of F's and I's and E's taken a different place, and it would have been something different to sound more German and less Jewish back in the day. So it gets harder to trace it. Then you can like, are those Briffles us? We don't know. So it's kind of complicated. But Laszlo lands in America and he reconnects with an old friend of his who runs a furniture shop called Miller and Sons. And this is sort of this immigrant story of like, his last name isn't Miller. He has just chosen the name so that the American punters will,
what does he say?
want
Like,
him more.
who's Miller? I'm Miller.
I'm Miller. Miller and Sons. It's a long-running business. And they are approached by the son of Harrison Van Buren. Joe Alwyn plays Harry Van Buren, who approaches this company and says, listen, while my father is away, I'd like you to come to our estate, an enormous, wealthy estate, and refurbish my father's library. I think it would be a lovely birthday present for him. And in this, of course, they accept the job and they start quoting the materials. And in the process of doing this, not only do they refurbish the library, but they create something distinct and artistic and grand and minimalist, and it uses natural light, and it's sort of like a hint at brutalist architecture. Harrison Van Buren, played by the wonderful Guy Pearce, storms through the door and screams, what the hell in God's name is going on here? There's also this element that you've got non-English speaking immigrants working in his very prestigious house, does not understand what's just been created, kicks them out the door, refuses to pay, and they sort of unfortunately depart the estate with very bad feelings. Harrison then catches up with our character Laszlo Toth, who he realizes is an esteemed brutalist architect in his hometown of Hungary, brings him photos of some of the great synagogues, libraries, and community centers that he has built, and decides to bring him into his house, introduce him to very wealthy friends, and there's this clashing of cultures between wealth and poor immigrant, and also this intersection of collecting an artistic Holocaust survivor, almost like a party entertaining thing. And there are complex relationships between wealth and those dynamics. But he announces to a dinner party, I have a plan. I would like to build on the hill, on the back garden of my estate, a massive building. I want it to be a chapel. I want it to be a library. It's going to be this grand artistic vision. And I would like you, Laszlo Toth, to be the chief architect of my construction. We then see the film fold on from here, with complications rising to the production itself. We have commentaries on the relation of the way in which art is made, the relationship to creativity and capitalism. Is also about Zionism and immigration, and also architecture. It is a big sweeping odyssey taking place over many years. It's got a 215-minute runtime, and it's in 2 halves with an interval. That is probably all you need to know about The Brutalist going into it. The name Brutalist refers to brutalist architecture, which, George?
Yeah, so brutalism was a movement of architecture that came in post-war. And just to clarify, it's got nothing to do with brutality.
No.
It is actually a slight misnomer, and actually maybe even a pejorative put onto brutalism for those who didn't like it. Brutalism, the word...
It refers to a brutality of history, but it's not itself.
Actually, it comes from the word béton brut, which means raw
cement.
concrete in French. That's simply where it comes from. But I agree, it is a type of, they were structures that were, first of all, concrete post-war, incredibly cheap. But solid. It was simple but grand in its statement. It's also worth mentioning that we discovered that Lazo was a student of Bauhaus. Just a little bit of disaster history. In the interwar period, Bauhaus was a German art school that put forward this, led by this guy called Walter Gropius, who put forward this idea about design with reference to architecture that was heavily emphasized on functionalism and practicality, but also melding that with artistic vision. And you have a movement that kind of followed on from the Bauhaus school that was all about simplicity, functionalism, clean lines. Brutalism bounces off from that, and you kind of get a period of brutalism from 50s to 60s. But he is brutalist architect, and there's a moment in the film where he talks about why concrete is a really important material.
George's architecture career is retired but not forgotten.
Not retired but not forgotten. Still there. Still on the way. It was on the subs bench going, put me in, coach.
Put me in. When I was watching with you, I could just feel you vibrating.
Well, what actually was quite refreshing is that I was in the same way that we've talked before about when there are legal dramas and we watch it with Talia or Anna, and they go, no. Yeah. But I will say that when the way this film, the way the architects in this film talk about architecture is correct.
Yeah, it checks
architecture
out.
language and correct terminology, and I was like, that's
so you and I have talked about this film
Yes.
for a few weeks, and if you follow us on Patreon especially, and you've listened to the show, we've been subtly hinting about our excitement to talk about the film. So George, now we are a few weeks on from seeing it, and we're talking about today. How did you get on with The Brutalist?
Well, yes. I mean, first of all, what I want to kind of get out of the way.
Sirens on our end.
Sirens on our end. If you can hear it first, I can actually see it. It's an ambulance.
Look at that.
One thing I want to get out of the way before we begin our discussion, because it is going to get away, is this issue of the runtime that people have has kind of been tagged onto any single discussion about the film. The runtime is the runtime. It's 2 hours 15. It is 3.5 hours long. And yes, before
3 hours 15. Oh, so 215 minutes.
215 minutes, 3.5 hours long. And yes, that is very daunting. However, two things. One, it has an intermission, as you mentioned, a 15-minute intermission, which makes it just like going to the theatre, a first act and a second act. And you know what? That makes all the difference. Secondly, it is actually very pacey. You and I said that we have seen slower
Shorter
2-hour films. Yeah. It is not, I personally did not feel it to be a slog. When I came out of it, I did not feel like I just slogged through a 3.5-hour movie.
No. Yeah, I agree.
Even the Killers of the Flower Moon didn't have an intermission. So just want to put that out of the way and decide that, yes, The Brutalist is really interesting. Really, really interesting. It is a massive, big, monumental, grand movie that comes together like a building being built before your very eyes. In a way, I think you and I were kind of talking off air, that it is one of those films that you're seeing it being constructed and it's only almost in its completion that, like a building, you can step back and go, oh, I can kind of see what that is now. And I look forward to, even though it's 3 hours and 30 minutes, I look forward to diving back into the layers and picking out elements to it. I think there are times when I think it's a little too aware of its own grandness and slightly overstates its grandness a little bit. And I just wish it could pull it back. However, what you've actually got in there is really interesting stuff. As you say, shot fantastically, just gorgeous to look at, and a really engaging but uncomfortable look at the American dream. You have this very uncomfortable relationship between Adrian Brody's character and Guy Pearce's character, between employer and employee, between master and servant, essentially. And that is charming, but uncomfortable. And then you also have the relationship between Adrian Brody and Erzsébet, his wife, played by Felicity Jones, who brings with her literal and metaphorical baggage from the Holocaust, and also his niece Zsofia. And there are the ghosts of the past lingering around. It reminded me, if you were to draw comparisons to any other films, it has the kind of ominous building towards a project and tension between people of There Will Be Blood. Yeah. But I think it also has the very cold relationship between employer and employee as something like Foxcatcher, actually. It was a context of working on a grand stake. And there's also this idea about, with immigration, it's that, Laszlo is a new immigrant to America, which is an immigrant nation. Let's not forget. America was, obviously, there were, pre-existing people in America, but
especially post-1945.
But post-1945, the history of America is one of immigration.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you have Van Buren. Van Buren itself, a Dutch name, would have originally been, but has now become old money. and Guy Pearce's and Adrian Brody's view on their characters' view on what America should be is really interesting. Great performances. Adrian Brody in the whole film, basically every single scene, basically, really carries it in a way that we always know he could. Anyone who's seen The Pianist knows he's a fantastic actor. It's great to see him get probably the best role he's had since then. I think even he's admitted that. I think it's Guy Pearce's best performance. Fantastic. Really, I was saying that in the same way that with Wicked, it's like that is Cynthia Erivo's movie, but Ariana Grande is great. It's like The Brutalist is Ariana Brody's. It is Adrian Brody's movie.
I just spliced them together in my head. It was horrifying.
Defying concrete. But it's also Guy Pearce being fantastic, and also Felicity Jones as well. And I noticed very early on that it's a huge film, but you and I were locked in, really engaging with it, and I was really beguiled by it. I think it's big and it's grand, and I look forward to sinking my teeth into it more. My tiny little part of my brain thinks it might think itself to be a little bit grander than it actually is, a little bit deeper than it kind of states itself to be. But I'm sure on second viewing I'd get more out of it. But I was really impressed by it.
Yeah, I totally agree and echo what you said. I knew this was a special film. Yes, watching it, but when we left the cinema, you and I tend to, if we can, hold our thoughts to each other because we don't want to use them up. But we had this thing where we were gonna hold it for a few weeks. The film has an epilogue which strikes a really interesting tone. Which, as you said, as you get towards the end of the film, you start to frame the ideas of the film as a whole, as a completed piece of art, almost like a building itself. And it has such an interesting framing for its own storytelling. And we both couldn't help but try to unpack that together and start to unpack it because this film confidently tackles so many different things in a way that, yes, when you list them on paper might come across as very pretentious, and it is a little bit, but it's so well accomplished. It is so masterfully put together and such a fine story. Like I said in the opening, it's about immigration, Zionism, class, violence, creativity and art, finance, addiction, and also architecture. It's also one of the great films about architecture. Not that I've seen them all, but I would so happily hold this up as a wonderful piece of storytelling. I all the things you said about performance. I think Adrian Brody has this wonderful determination, but frailty. He always seems like he's just 2% body fat, and the wrong wind could come in and you'd knock him over, and he could have broken at any time.
Apparently, the costume designer actually picked clothing that highlighted his frame.
Yes,
showed him to be a pencil of a man.
It really comes across, and he's got this very sort of thin, bony facial structure that really adds to that. The way this film looks is an absolute master. If you didn't know, it's shot on VistaVision, which I didn't. You and I had this thing walking out where it looked really distinct. It looked really striking. It had a really interesting effect. It was definitely large format, but I couldn't tell in what way it was. And it's this reclaimed film stock that was last used in the 1960s called VistaVision, which is like a large format film stock that allows you to use slightly closer lenses to capture a larger frame. So it basically increases your field of view without needing to punch in. And that allows, in the words of Brady Corbet, him to shoot faces and buildings all in the same frame and capture the magnitude of them. And even if he's not shooting buildings, he's shooting construction sites, and you're sort of up close with the magnitude of them, and then later the buildings themselves and the emotion. And it just looks gorgeous. The color grading of it, the present film stock, all of it was just such a pleasure to watch. So I think if you are into cinematography and you want to unpack something that looks like something really distinct and different, go and treat yourself to The Brutalist. It was like finishing a wonderful novel. It's a film that really winds into itself. First half are very optimistic, as you said, about the American dream. There's so much hope and promise, and I think as an audience member I felt naive thinking about all of the hopeful things I thought in the first half. But the film, like a wonderful story, opens itself up and then folds and contorts back into itself in the most compelling way. I love what it has to say about the creation of art, how capitalism can create and destroy art at the same time, and the warnings about that. I think what it does as a film commenting on the Holocaust without ever showing it, I think is really brilliant and really restrained. And it could have our characters have just left an incredibly significant event in their lives, but we're picking up in media res for them, I guess, after the fact. And they are talking occasionally about the horrors of what has happened. But I think it shows a lot of restraint that Brady Corbet never cut back and showed something to help inform the film he was telling. It always expressed in everywhere else, and it left us as audience members to fill in the blanks. And I thought it was so wonderfully done, and it is in so many ways one of the better films that comments on the Holocaust.
Yeah, I agree.
And the relationship between Europeans and Americans in that post-war era, American entrepreneurialism and naivety, and European depression, and the lack of what is said, and trying to process things. Anyone who has family members who are familiar, anyone who knows people who will and won't talk about the Holocaust, I think it actually nails that sentiment on the head. Yes, it is incredibly long, and it is hard to recommend to people to say take 4 hours essentially out of your day to go and see it. But I think it's a really rare, special gem of a film that should be savoured and earned its right to tell the story and cover so many things over such a long time. I think it's a very special film that's very brilliantly done.
And James and I, in doing this show now for over 3 years, we have learned and I've come to appreciate the fact that ultimately, whatever film, just taking the Brutalist aside for a second, the best way to experience it is in the cinema. Totally. I know that's something that cineasts and cinema lovers say all the time. It's become a bit of a cliche, but it is actually true. And a film like The Brutalist is a really good example of that, not just for the way it looks and for its grandness, but in a way, if you are going to see a 3.5 hour movie, it is better to see it in the cinema, where you are a captive audience, where you are restrained, you don't have your phone out, and you lock in because you need to lock in because you're going to be there for 3.5 hours to tell this epic story.
And I understand it's a huge privilege. Like, we don't have young kids. We're fairly like independent, young guys in our 30s. And I know some people will say, oh, well, it's a lot easier for me to watch that kind of film at home. And my argument is always, well, is it? I find it very hard to have 3+ hours, even 2 hours, let alone 3.5 of uninterrupted time at home, where my phone isn't popping off, someone's trying to call me with any WhatsApp group relating internet news, or like it sounds really bad, but like a family member walking in, food, this. Like, I don't really get 3.5 hours of uninterrupted time at home. Whereas the cinema experience it has intention. I have intentionally taken myself to go here, and I will see The Brutalist and come out.
The mistake that people fall into, I think, is thinking that their home environment is a controlled environment.
No.
I know where I am at home. No. The cinema is a controlled environment. That is actually what the cinema is providing you with. It's a dedicated space, a dedicated time, best picture quality, best sound quality. And there is a difference between being sat at home thinking, oh, I can just pause it now if I want to, because I can.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're sat in a cinema and you're sat even in the middle of a row,
the fact that it can't be paused.
It can't be paused. And if you have to get up, you're going to disrupt people. It's important. And the thing is about ease as well. Just remember that, like, the amount of time and effort that went in to make a movie. And I feel like it's really very little to on your part as an audience member to go to the cinema. It's a tiny bit of effort that makes a huge amount of difference. Obviously, we still watch films at home. And like, we totally understand why people do that. But it's just often when we see films like this that are so cinematic that we really encourage people to go see them.
And we've talked before about how problematic it is for us to stand here and go, you have to see it in cinema, which is a limited time period when it will exist forever, most likely on the small screen. But that all the more doubles down on the fact that if it's worth seeing and it's a special film that is covering all of these things, it's worth seeing it. Please just go and take yourself and have that experience. So yeah, I think Brady Corbet has spoken when he got the Golden Globes. He spoke about it and he said, it's a miracle this film could happen. We have to be able to allow filmmakers to tell the stories they want to tell. And sure, are all the films going to be as good as this that try to cover this much? Most likely not. No. But I think it's like, I'm really like treasuring this film as something special that should be savoured and sipped like a fine wine.
Absolutely.
These types of films are really special. They don't come around
No, exactly. And it is different and it is bold and it is engaging. Yeah. Also, I really didn't like his previous film, Vox Lux.
Right.
And I really didn't think it was really good at all.
Yeah.
So for this to even be marginally good was a real improvement. That was a big surprise to me.
I now want to go and check out Vox Lux and his other films.
You know what? Go see it.
We can report back.
I think it's a mess. I think it tries to get good ideas. I think this is a massive improvement. But, I mean, there's so much to dig into. The moments of... when of like Guy Pearce meeting Felicity Jones's character for the first time, and the way he sort of tries to joke but ends up teasing Laszlo about his background. And
Felicity Jones, I think, is her best performance.
Yeah, I think so.
She's very vulnerable and frail, but not at the expense of being like brave and determined. Like she has real moments of strength in this film, and that can be, especially for female characters in most films, that's a really hard line to toe. But I think she has some brilliant scenes in this.
And Joe Alwyn, terrifically slimy and punchable. You just wanted to punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And I loved it when you and I came out. We were really thinking about how the movie opens and how the movie ends, and what characters are actually significant. And you mentioned about the Holocaust. I agree. We were thinking like in many ways it's so much a film about the Holocaust, but it's not about the Holocaust. But it is about the Holocaust. But it's a shadow. You know,
when you've watched a film that's forcing you to engage with architecture for 3+ hours and its meaning and its intention, and the epilogue in particular, if you've seen it, you know, its framing, its ending, and the way in which someone's art is going to be remembered in a really interesting and contrasting way. And that forced me to think, well, what is that trying to say? And I still don't really have a clear idea in my mind, but I'm constantly cycling through and wondering, and it's just food for thought.
I will say this as well. This isn't a spoiler. I'm going to dance around it, but I think it's worth flagging because I spoke to somebody else who had seen it, and I mentioned this, and they went, "Oh, thank you for clarifying that. It really confused me." In the epilogue, in the closing 10 minutes, there is a casting
black mark on this, I think.
A casting decision where a character is cast using an actor from earlier in the film in a different way that isn't explained enough, that is just a distraction.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we've just spent 3.5 hours with this movie. In the last 10 minutes, did you really need to make that why you didn't need to make that confusing? You felt the same way.
I picked up on it at the time and I was like, I'm not going to think about this too much, but I'm pretty sure that's happened.
So
it's
just
annoying.
basically, if you go and see it and there's something towards the end that you go, huh? Be like, just ignore it. It's this, but okay.
Hannah writes in to hello at Pulp Kitchen podcast, just like you can, about the Brutalist, and says, "Hello, James and George. Hope you're having a great January. We're both sick. Finally, we can talk about the Brutalist. What a film. It does an incredible job portraying the artist's conflicted personality. Probably going to be my favorite non-biopic biopic. Yeah, I should say it's fiction. It's not based on a true story. It's like, it felt like it could have been based on a true story.
It's a bit like Tar as well. It's not like a downfall like Tar, but it's like a fictional thing that could be real.
Totally. Among all its obvious strengths, it explores something I feel hasn't been talked about much in films like this: the artist's complex relationship with architecture as an art form. And isn't it ironic that Corbet's film came out of the same year as Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis? Brutalist is a healthier version of Megalopolis. Not that the two films need to be compared, but I think you know what I mean. The movie really captures how art, meant to carry light, enlightenment, also carries darkness and can irrevocably change its creator. Like all art, it doesn't truly belong to its maker. It can take on a life of its own, sometimes even consuming the artist. With architecture, this idea feels even more relevant. It exists in open, often public spaces, losing that sense of artistic preservation. Think of the controlled environment of the gallery and instead becomes part of the world, sometimes overshadowing the name of its creator. I caught myself thinking about the most famous modern architectural landmarks and realizing I had no idea who designed them. Anyway, I could go on about this forever, but I'll wrap things up with a bit of interesting, I hope, trivia. The Hungarian language you hear Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones speak in voiceovers wasn't actually spoken by them. It was done using AI, combining their voices with Hungarian voice actors. The company behind it is based in my home country, Ukraine, and one of my friends works there, so I had a pleasure of listening to how it was actually done. Thanks so much for the pod. By the time I'm writing this, I haven't heard your thoughts on the film yet, but I'm really looking forward to them. All the best, Hannah. Hannah, thank you so much. Thank you for that.
I feel like they're kind of keeping that on the DL because I feel like people get funny about AI. But
yeah, it's interesting because that's interesting. Just reflecting on what you said about art and how it's received. Like the building that Laszlo's designing is on a hill for everyone to see, but later it's an image carousel of him at a gallery, right? It's like his art is being like projected on a wall. It's like, yeah, it's interesting. Art being on a hill, alone, isolated, observed, versus amongst other art.
I also, fascism, we haven't really mentioned as well, in the same way that like Van Buren is in many ways a fascist and about his own view on what I mean, he's prejudiced and he's bigoted, but he is kind of fascistic in his own kind of messianic, monumental view of what he can deliver for America. And I think the reality is also coming from Europe. They've experienced fascism firsthand, and it's not just also the Holocaust as well, but obviously Erzsébet's still in Hungary, where there's been a regime change. And there's still communist dictatorship there, like lingering. I think, but it's still like that element of dealing with dictatorial, fascistic-like people.
Americans being very inward-looking as well. Like they don't really engage with the actual world around them and what's happened. It's and like as you say, when see you there.
And parading, as you say, Laszlo as like a story. And it's interesting when Laszlo's at that party. he's telling him about real, trauma that he's been through, but he's seeing the cut glass and the chintzy sort of also spectacle of the party.
A wonderful scene when they go to this incredible marble quarry. I think it's the Carrera quarry, where they etch out these gorgeous marble slabs. And there's this wonderful moment where the film slows down and it engages spiritually with the rock itself. And commentary on man harvesting stone from the earth itself and
baptizing the water,
etching
the rock
into the very mountain itself. It's just a visually striking, gorgeous.
It's a bit like that whole quarry sequence is a bit like the Babylon thing. You said that, didn't you? And in a way, Babylon is a lesser film, but you kind of think that this is what Damien Chazelle kind of wanted to have a monumental epic in the same way that Brady Corbet has this. Anyway, we've talked about it at length, but we haven't spoiled anything. It's a great long film. Sink your teeth into it. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Send them in to hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com.
Thanks, guys.
George, should we go through some of the emails that we get sent into the show every single week? As always, guys, if you wanted to send in your reviews, your questions, your thoughts, your concerns, you can send them into hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com, or you could support us at the VIP tier on Patreon and have priority access to have your email read out on the show. Just like Owen did. Owen writes in with another wonderful list rank-a-thon for an actor.
So,
last few weeks, we've done Scarlett Johansson, we've done Matt Damon,
Ryan
Gosling,
and Tom Cruise.
Yes. Owen writes in and says, hey guys, another week, another film list to challenge. Thank you for taking the time over the Ryan Gosling list. Films I've seen this week are The Woman in the Sea, really enjoyed it.
Young Woman in the Sea, yeah, it's a good movie. Yeah.
Oppenheimer, finally found the time now, incredible, 9 out of 10. You're a bit late, but glad you enjoyed it. Wonka, as someone who lives in Bath, it was great to see my city in show. Fun film, great performances, but not one for breaking into song scenes, 7 out of 10. So this week's list, my top 5 Sandra Bullock films. Rearrange, add in, or take out to improve the list. At number 5, it's gone Demolition Man.
Never seen it.
Number 4, Speed.
Good movie.
Number 3, Crash. This is so funny though. Speed comes before the Crash. Yeah. Number 3, The Blind Side. Number 1, Gravity.
So number 2, The Blind Side. Number 1.
Sorry, yes. Number 3, Crash. Number 2, The Blind Side. Number 1, Gravity.
Okay. Full disclosure, haven't seen that many Sandra Bullock films. Just I don't think I can give you 5. Speed would be in there. Then I'd say Gravity.
The Heat.
I know. Is that good? I've heard
really
people say
funny.
it's good. Yeah.
I've not seen it for a really long time, but had such low expectations. Sandra Bullock, Melissa McCarthy. Me and Talia watched that just like on our laptop in bed, howling with laughter.
My film studies professor recommended
It's really funny.
Miss Congeniality, she is good in it.
Yeah.
I'm
not sure how well The Blind Side ages.
No, I remember because I think I told you this before. The guy who was depicted in it, who's the main character, he came out and said that's a complete misrepresentation of my life.
Yeah,
that they never helped me. They took lots of money from me.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was like.
But all us white people watched it. We were like, yeah,
it's a complete white savior film. Yeah. So I would.
Crash is actually decent.
Crash gets a bad rap because it isn't as good as Brokeback Mountain, and it won the Best Picture Oscar. That's the famous thing. It's like Crash won.
You're right.
But I've only seen it once. It was like 20 years ago. Yeah. When I saw it when I was 13, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've seen it when I was like maybe 13, 14.
And maybe when we're older, we go, that's a bit.
Yeah, like there's the Michael Pena thing where he puts the fake blanket around his daughter to protect her from harm. I don't want to spoil Crash for anyone who's seen it. If you know, you know.
I know I know the thing that's on the poster. I know why that event happens in that way.
Yeah.
That Ludacris is in that movie.
He was in films, he was doing things.
He still is.
Yeah, he still is.
Yeah.
Gravity, I think, is like solid fun. It was the best 3D film.
Do you think that's her best though? She is in it a lot. She's pretty good in it. Can I just say this? I love Sandra Bullock.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rank her as highly as the other actors that we've done this for.
Yeah, I see what
you know what I mean? Like
Speed is great.
I feel like ScarJo, Ryan Gosling, Matt Damon, Tom Cruise have all proved themselves in other things. Whereas Sandra Bullock, good. Not saying
I'd love to see her and stuff.
So
did you watch Bird Box? Did you watch Bird Box?
Sandra Bird Box. No, I haven't seen that.
It. She's fine in it.
Okay, I'm going to go Speed, Miss Congeniality, and Gravity. There you go.
And I'll throw in The Prince of Egypt there because I like it.
Thank you, Owen.
Thank you, Owen.
This next email is from Yanis, who writes in saying June Part 2 and award ceremonies. By the way, Yanis, this email, emoji-tastic.
Oh, yeah, just constantly.
It's like you stumbled at each one and you put
you got like arms up, you got prayer.
You've put James and George, and then have you emoji-dized us?
Yeah. I see. I'm not that heavily bearded.
And I'm not that blonde, but sure. Okay, second time emailing and finally caught up with the episodes. Whilst the 2024 nominations and awards categories begin, I've been quite surprised how under the radar Dune Part 2 seems to be doing. And for that, he's included an emoji of a desert with a cactus. Although at the time of writing, the Oscar shortlist hasn't been revealed, I assume that it'll be the case there as well. Although films like Anora...
Sirens on our end.
Sirens on our end. Although films like Anora, The Brutalist, Wild Robot have been given high praise, the cinematic experience of Dune Part 2 was beyond any I had last year. I am very biased because I was with a friend of mine in the cinema to see it, and a few other Pulp Kitchen listeners in the same row. Overheard George and James, listening soon, review. Interested to see if my bias of a good viewing affects my thoughts on these awards, and what do you think that now that the hype has settled? Was it a standout of 2024, or did other films just shine brighter in specific award categories? Obviously, a film doesn't need an award to be good, but regardless, it can be taken that way. Side note, but a family member of mine watched it, Dune Part 2, on a long flight last year, and I guess it's good they got to see it, but surprised it's been put on a plain catalogue of films. Love the pod and all the best to my top Spotify podcast of 2024, Yanis Pulp Kitchen. Thank you, Yanis. Thing is, people who choose the films for planes, they don't care about
They
cinematic.
just want a good selection. They want people to go on the plane and be like, oh, look, they've got that one. I missed that.
What was the
in
biggest
cinema.
selling film of last year?
I mean, yeah, it doesn't have the recency bias that the other films had. But, you and I totally back it. You put it as your film of the year for last year.
I had an amazing experience of it.
I totally back it. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where it picks up awards, if at all, and who it takes it from.
I think my anticipation is that if it's lucky, it gets a Best Picture nomination. Won't win. It's not in the conversation at all. If he's lucky, Denis Villeneuve will get an Oscar nod for director, like he has at the BAFTAs. Won't win. Greg Fraser probably gets recognised. He won for Dune Part 1, I think.
Yeah.
He could probably get recognised for Dune Part 2. Will he win? Not sure. But yes, it doesn't seem to be pushing in. I also don't think the studio's pushing it. I think they're like, it was a year ago.
Their cake and they ate it.
Yeah, we did really well.
Yeah.
It's okay. If it had come out when it was meant to have come out in November 2023, maybe they would have pushed for it.
It doesn't need the awards.
It doesn't need
the other films don't need
It's
them.
already succeeded.
Yeah. This next one is from Madeline, who writes in, subject line, Titanic.
Yes, because I watched Titanic for the first time and we put out a little clip on the feed.
Hello again, boys. It's been a while since I first emailed in, but I've still been listening. When I last emailed, I mentioned I was studying performing arts, and I can now say I've graduated from the degree, and I've just been cast in 2 shows, which I'm super thrilled about. Madeline,
Congratulations.
Congrats. Anyway, I was emailing to discuss Titanic now that George has seen it.
Yes.
Titanic is one of my favourite films, along with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and something that occurred to me listening to your thoughts about the film is that this was also my first experience of a sex scene in a film, and just mature ideas and topics seen as I watched for the first time. Jeez, Madeline, punctuation. Mature ideas and topics as I
think
watched
you
it
could
for the
slow
first
down
time.
as well.
I was waiting for a comma that never came. Watched it for the first time at about 11, and I hadn't yet viewed or studied large tragic events such as the Titanic. One thing in retrospect that I think had an effect on me was this is also the first time I absorbed the place of a woman in society in the early 1900s. As I was so young viewing the film for the first time, I didn't understand how young Rose was in the position she was put in with Cal and having to marry him, even though it was obviously set up for her. In watching the film back since being over 20, I could see the stresses that her mother and her had in that time, with such reliance on male status, which I think is a fantastic choice of the writers to show what life was like for women whose father must have either died or walked out on their family. I also have such a nostalgic relationship to Titanic now, as the combination of the score and the scale of the film had such an effect on me at a younger age that I remember every time I went to a beach or was near a large view of the ocean, the score would run in my mind, or I'd think about how some aspect of the deep ocean scenes. Being in New Zealand, I was always quite close to the ocean, and it was a common instance. Super glad that George enjoyed the film, and I think I'm going to watch it again tonight. Anyway, I also wanted to mention how absolutely impressive it is listening to you guys for a couple of years now, and hearing how far you've come. When I first wrote in, I didn't have a doubt that you would read my emails. It sounded like you had a much smaller amount of listeners, but now I'm crossing my fingers that you'll even see my email. So you guys should be proud of yourselves and all the work you put in. Can't wait to hear more. I've been adding to my list of films to watch based on your reviews, and the list is getting big now. Haha. I've set a goal of 3 films a week, so we'll see how that goes. Chat soon. A fellow siren, Mads. Mads, thank you so much for your lovely email.
So much.
Check out our video where George had seen Titanic for the first time and we unpacked it.
James, not only also did we put that on our feed, our little rewatch of Titanic, watching it for the first time, I I feel very old now, but I went over the weekend and binge listened to a 6-part episode series on the Titanic by The Rest is History.
Fantastic.
Very illuminating.
Yeah.
And I got really sucked in. And that whole tragedy and whole disaster seems very different to me now. They weren't going too fast. They were going the same speed as other ships in that thing. He wasn't asked to go faster. That's a complete myth.
I think it would be a real...
The lifeboat thing,
paper.
yes, absolute tragedy. There weren't enough lifeboats, but apparently no ships were carrying enough lifeboats because the standard practice at that time wasn't. Apparently, also, like, the conditions on the Titanic were very, very good, and like was in many ways it was the best ship around.
Yeah.
The confluence of circumstances, of all the micro circumstances that led to that disaster, is really interesting because it's because of so many little things that ultimately means it just happened to be that ship on that night. That's
it's almost one of those things where, like, dare I say, the film is more famous than the event itself. For a lot of people in the generation.
No way. What?
No, but in terms of how people are referencing the event, they are referencing the film, not the actual event itself.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's becoming the ultimate reference point for the event.
Yeah, no, that's how people understand because they go, well, that didn't happen in the movie. Yeah, and they go, well, hang on.
That in pop culture is more.
Where I just moved to, there's a park in the centre of town that's like really well designed and stuff, and it is a memorial park. And I went for a walk and I read the sign because I like history. Yeah. I thought, what's this? I thought it was a war memorial. No. It's a memorial to a man who was from that town who was the chief wireless officer on the Titanic.
On the wireless?
Who was doing the telegraphist.
No idea how that works.
It was called a Marconigram in those days, not even a telegram. Right. And he was still sending out SOS messages 3 minutes before the ship sank. He went down with the ship, staying at his post to try and relay help for the Titanic. Isn't that incredible? Great. Jack Phillips was his name.
Fantastic.
A bit of history for you there. This next email is from Sally, who writes in saying, greetings from Swansea. Hi, guys. Firstly, let me say thank you for your incredible podcast.
Oh, thank you very much.
I only discovered you late in 2024, but Pulp Kitchen is most definitely among my favourite weekly listens. Thank you. Your knowledge and enthusiasm for film is superb, and I particularly enjoy the interview with Sean Baker about the making of Anora. I could tell you that he appreciated your in-depth and thoughtful questions. It's a film that I'm very much looking forward to seeing. Unfortunately, I have ME/chronic fatigue syndrome, and cinema trips are a thing of the past, as I'm pretty much housebound. Very sorry to hear that. Ever the optimist, however, I keep adding to my list of film and TV to watch when I can, and your recommendations are helping me curate quite a list.
Nice.
My 16-year-old son and I have a regular film and TV nights. He's introducing me to some of his favourite anime, One Piece, and I'm showing him some of my favourite films. Earlier this week, we both really enjoyed The Grand Budapest Hotel, great movie.
Nice.
And The Death of Stalin. Do you like Have you seen The Death of Stalin?
Yeah. It's great fun.
I rate that. I think it's also now underrated. I think it's a really,
I agree.
really funny film. Do you have any recommendations for films I could share with him? Many thanks for keeping me entertained and informed. All the very best, Sally. It's the Welsh spelling of Sally.
Nice. You spell it S-A-L-I.
S-A-L-I, yeah, sure.
I would just now, we've been talking about a complete unknown, I'd go and check out Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah.
It really sort of a darker, more somber Coen Brothers film that's very highly regarded on those film lists. I'm now like thinking back on it and going, yeah, I did really enjoy that.
It's quite tender as well, isn't it? Like, it's very softly, dewy lit. It's all kind of grey, but it's coloured. But it's
the spectre of death is constantly very present in that movie. It's very naughty. It's good. It's a good conversation piece if you want to elevate and give yourself something to chew on.
You feel, you really do. Like with Carey Mulligan's character, you understand and feel completely differently about her towards the end. I'd like to rewatch it now, having seen
one of the films where Oscar Isaac was really shining through as a really hot talent back in 2014 when the film came out. So yeah, just about to be cast in Star Wars, wasn't he? So just purely based on our conversation today, Inside Llewyn Davis, Coen Brothers film. This next one is from Jess, who writes in and says, subject line, regional towns and missing cinema. Jess writes in, hi guys, sending an email that genuinely doesn't have to be read out, but just some thoughts for you both. When you were discussing biggest box office flops last week and mentioned The Book of Clarence, I remembered how much I really wanted to see that film when it came out, but there weren't any screenings at my local cinemas. I was so excited that film. It looked so colourful and fun. I texted my mum about it. We were waiting. And it just never came.
Yeah.
No, my movie ticket purchase in my regional town in Australia wouldn't have made the movie more successful, but it was something I really wanted to support in cinema and couldn't. In Toowoomba, we are lucky to have a big cinema in our shopping centre with a VMAX and a smaller, older cinema around the corner. While this is better than some places, Dolby an hour away tore their cinema down.
Bloody Dolby.
Bloody Dolby.
Shelbyville.
They tore their cinema down. I still find it frustrating that I would have to travel 2 hours to Brisbane to support some films. Brisbane to support some films. I remember asking this.
It's like
Brisbane.
Hey, I went to Brisbane. Sorry, go on.
I texted my mum about it.
Also, the scale of Australia is
Yes.
just blowing my
blowing my
mind.
mind.
The nearest is 2 hours
Driving
away in
2
Brisbane.
hours to see a film
Because
longer than the film itself.
Dolby
to go there. Yeah.
tore us down.
I remember asking the cinema workers last year when they were going to show American Fiction, and they responded that they hadn't heard of it and weren't showing it. This is when it had just been nominated for Best Picture. I know I'm still lucky with the movies that do come out. Nora has only just come out this week, and Maria will be out on the 30th. And this is a small thing to complain about. I just want to support cinema. That's what I love, the travelling film festivals that come around to regional towns. Do you have these in England? I went to 5 movies in 3 days last year when it was on, and while they were mostly foreign language films that had won big awards, they also showed Sing Sing. I was so excited because you talked about it on the pod, and I was so happy to be able to actually see it. I don't think there would have been any other way for me to see it, as I don't believe they'll have screenings in the cinema. That was also how I got to see Blackberry the year before. When, in 30 years' time, you're trying to decide what to do with your podcast and how to retire with a legacy, please consider starting your own film festival that could travel around to places that don't get to see much cinema, or donating to an existing one. Australia is much bigger than England, so maybe everyone in your country simply travels to London. We have a lot of open spaces in small towns in Australia, so people won't waste money travelling to bigger towns to see anything, unless it's Gladiator 2. That's why I love travelling film festivals. If you want to Google it, the Sydney one is great. Thank you for your work in making people who love movies feel less alone. You've equipped me with a lot of cinema language that makes it easier to express my thoughts on film. Through my growing love of cinema, I found that some other people are just as nerdy as me, and we go to support cinema together. It's great. Just on that, picking up on our conversation about going to see a film in cinema, it's exactly the type of thing that we are so lucky to have.
Yes.
We live near/in a very big city with many options, and even like outside of London, there are loads of options to see a film. It's very like a cinema-engaged culture in the UK.
Yes.
We're very lucky that cinemas are everywhere, even if they're not glamorous. Like there are multiplexes in Milton Keynes.
If I drove 2 hours from here, you go to Manchester, right?
Yes.
Think how many cinemas you're passing on the way.
You'd be all right.
I'd be all right.
And then, like festivals question, like London has got the London Film Festival and loads of others, like culture, arts and media, screened in many different ways. Premium, small, art house, that's all. We're very lucky.
We are very lucky.
2 questions to finish off and chat about together. While the war between Israel and Hamas was raging, okay, here we go. I was thinking a lot about movies like The Post and wondering what movie they'll make in 20 years' time about the devastation in Palestine and what will be uncovered. It will probably be the first big war I remember living through, where I feel so stupid in 20 years' time for not knowing more and not doing more. I wonder if older generations feel guilt when they watch movies like The Post. My question is, what movie have you watched that has made you feel guilty? Maybe it's yet to come. Interesting question. It's the kind of thing that, as you get 20 plus in age, you start to remember things like, this isn't about a war per se, and I don't feel guilt towards it, but it's great to see a film like The Big Short come along about the financial crash, which I was 13 or 12 when that happened, and that reframes your understanding of it and living through it. Also being in a position of privilege where my home wasn't lost, my parents still had their jobs, but nonetheless, like you're seeing the news and how that impacted everything. I don't know if I have a film that's made me feel guilty per se. For ignorance through a moment in time that I've lived in. Again, like another Anna McKay film, Vice, about the Iraq War. Good question, though. For question number 2, for something relevant, I'm watching Disclaimer on Apple TV Plus, and it's very good. Kate Blanchett, have you heard of it or watched it? Boy, does Alfonso Cuarón love his circular fade to blacks. Very Harry Potter 3. Thank you for the work you do. Cinema is very important, and what you do matters so much. From Jess in Toowoomba. Jess, thank you for your lovely email.
And also sent from Yahoo Mail. Search, organise, conquer. Little byline for
that.
Yahoo Mail. I didn't know Yahoo Mail was still kicking around.
Conquering.
Disclaimer, know all about it. Haven't seen it yet, want to. TV is the thing we want to do. It's just there. It's just
I'm going to queue up Severance season 2 soon, but like the conversation's happening now. It's like, I'm going to force myself.
In
to
a way,
about
the
it on
more
show.
TV that comes, it entrenches me more in film. I go, I just can't. There's no way I can. The mountain gets higher and higher every day.
It just has to be for me.
Yeah.
I'll watch the TV when I get to it.
Yeah.
If I'm watching something at the same time as the people, fantastic. But if not, I'm not going to get.
But also, I mentioned to you on Double Take that I just last night started watching Shrinking with Anna on Apple TV, and in a way, like if I am going to watch TV, it's almost like that because I'm not. I don't care that much about it in the sense that like I don't know if I'll review it or whatever. I need to be able to watch something in my life that I'm not obliged to work on, you know, that I'm not obliged to talk about.
Yeah. So I don't need to tell James about this experience.
Yeah, it's okay if I watch something fairly middling.
Yeah.
Because every week our job is to sit down here and talk to each other about films. And this last email is from Amy about Anora. She writes in and says, Anora reaction, wow. Hello, George and James and George. I finally had the chance to see Anora. It only dropped in another Australian, by the way.
Coming through. Hey, they're the only other country we chart in.
Really?
Yeah.
Make us do great, Australia. It only dropped in Australia on Boxing Day. Wow, what a surprisingly gorgeous film. I had your glowing review in my head going in, but I didn't want to get too excited. Yeah. I should have been excited, though. It is hilarious. Yeah. Has a fantastic soundtrack, and by the time the edits were rolling, I was crying. Credits. What the hell? I know that wealth and sex work are dominant themes in the film, but I feel this film does an incredible job of exploring female rage. Mikey Madison's performance is restrained at times, and then she goes for it when required. I felt the tension Annie experiences of always being on the lookout for people who may attack, betray, or take advantage of her, even though she's only 23, and how exhausted she is from constantly being on the lookout for bad people. For all those reasons, I loved spending time with this character, and I'm so impressed with Mikey's performance. Has there been a spoiler chat for this film that I've missed? Thank you very much for both highlighting this absolute gem. Amy from Sydney. We didn't do a spoiler chat.
No.
But, and I think we're quite a few months now from when we've last seen it, so I don't feel like it's fresh enough in our minds. But you can go check our review. You can go listen to our conversation with Sean Baker and Mikey Madison. We really liked it.
I think we'll just like continue to touch and revisit these films as they get nominated for such awards, and our opinions will evolve with yours, and we'll be touching back on them. So as always, stay tuned. But is that it?
That is it for the emails today, guys.
Guys, that's all the emails. Sorry.
Guys, that's all the emails we have today.
I got autopilot, like ready to go.
Guys, that's all the emails we have today. Thank you very much for sending them in. If you'd like to send us your thoughts, particularly on any recent films you've seen that or we've covered on the show, send them into hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com and we'll read them out. James, as ever, Pulp Kitchen ends
with a game.
And a quick little short game for us to end with this week. Just a game of cast list countdown to send us home. Cast list countdown, very much the after dinner mint, I think, to send us home. Whereas something like the sound game is a full dessert.
Yeah.
It requires engagement. It's a fondue set.
Yes.
You've got to dip in, there's different sounds.
Sound game's coming back, don't worry.
Oh yeah, we just... It's quite a lot to do every week,
yes,
but it's in our repertoire.
Totally.
And today we've given you an interview with the director. We leave you an after dinner mint. That is,
if you feel undeserved, write in an email and try and justify that.
So, James, as ever, I'm going to read you the cast of the movie, and you have to try and guess the cast of the movie before I reach the end,
because we do a film podcast.
And this film has a good cast.
Nice.
Are you ready? Guess the movie from the cast. Alison Janney.
Okay.
Jean Reno.
Oh.
Matthew Broderick.
Oh, okay.
Kieran Culkin. Mark Ruffalo. Matt Damon. And lastly, Anna Paquin. Do you know what that is?
No, go on.
Good cast, right?
Yeah, great cast.
So that is an underseen, but I think very good film called Margaret.
Oh,
so written Margaret, but called Margaret. It's by Kenneth Lonergan. It's the movie he made before he made Manchester by the Sea, and it's got a great cast in it. It was shot in 2005, but are you looking it up?
Yeah, just getting it up.
It was shot in 2005, but then went through some sort of legal difficulty when I think one of the studios was bought by another one, and it wasn't actually released until 2011. So it sat on. It's one of those films that sat on the shelf of a studio somewhere for 6 years.
Yes.
And the best way I can describe it is essentially Manchester by the Sea meets Lady Bird.
Right.
So,
okay.
The story is this: Anna Paquin is a young teenager, which might be college student, and she's walking through New York City one day. And she's kind of making eye contact with Mark Ruffalo, who plays this bus driver. And they're having sort of like a little bit of a flirtatious look at each other. And perhaps because of that, or maybe not because of that, Mark Ruffalo doesn't see the red light and ends up hitting Alison Janney with his bus and kills her. And there's this scene of Alison Janney dying on the sidewalk, like on the road. Everyone's gathered around. It's really horrific. Anna Paquin is then kind of traumatized by this event that she has seen, but then she also has to carry on with her life. So she goes to high school. She has clashes with her mother, who's played by J. Smith Cameron, who was in Succession. And she's sort of dealing with Kieran Culkin at high school. She's got Matthew Broderick as a teacher.
Yeah.
And she's got this sort of weird kind of psychosexual relationship with Matt Damon. But she's got this relationship with her mother, played by J. Smith Cameron. This is like Lady Bird, which is like mother and daughter having difficulty with each other. And you're trying to be a teenager, but there's also this thing that you just saw, this horrific thing that you might have been complicit in. Anyway, it's like 3 hours long.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a three.
Wow.
I mean, it says 2.5 hours here, but no, it's a 3-hour movie.
Wow.
But not a bad movie at all. If you have time, you're interested. If you want to see a movie that is Lady Bird meets Manchester by the Sea, watch Margaret.
Another recommendation then, straight out of today's episode.
And that's why you don't just get a game, James.
You get a recommendation.
You get a recommendation.
Pulp
That is
Kitchen stamp of approval.
Margaret. There you go.
Thank you so much for that, George. And thank you so much for everyone listening who joins us today on Pulp Kitchen. Don't forget we post new episodes of this podcast every single Wednesday.
Don't forget you can also check out our exclusive show on Patreon. If you sign up to our Patreon, our exclusive movie news show, Double Take, where this week we talked about David Lynch sadly passing away. We talked about the BAFTA nominations, kind of gave sort of fingers on the pulse of the awards race at the moment with that. Talked about
new Marvel films.
Yes, the runtime of the Marvel films.
Runtime, potentially problematic rumours we heard on the grapevine. Go sign up for that. James Cameron commenting on Avatar 3. Daredevil Born Again trailer, we talked about that. So all great news stuff. And if you sign up to that, you get access to every single episode of Double Take back through the months.
Next week, we'll be in Sundance.
Yes,
so we'll have a different setup. So it might be a little bit more casual, but you'll see.
We're bringing our mic like a sort of an artist on the road instead of a guitar case. We'll have our podcast mics and our camera, and we'll bring you guys over to Sundance. That's it.
I extend our hand. Come with us to the Sundance Film Festival.
Come here. Check out the Pulp Kitchen podcast social medias to see behind the scenes and all of the fun from there. We're going to be capturing our experience. We'll be like filming little bits of us at the airport, having fun, being silly. So, that should be really good fun. It's going to be -17.
Here we go.
So we might tune in and George will just be like, I'm just waiting for him to thaw.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, it's Nosferatu.
Thank you very much for joining us,
just
guys.
in general, like that's an experience that we got because you guys have supported us, followed us on social media, listened to the podcast. That it always because of you guys, and it means the world. We George are constantly pinching ourselves and just being like, "This is crazy." It's a presenting job for us.
It's a presenting gig. That's why we've been
cool.
taken out there to present and meet actors and talk to them.
Just being asked to be our wonderful personalities on camera for a brand and for Sundance, which is just crazy to think about. But it's all because of your support. So please keep listening, keep sharing it with your friends. Or you Australians, get us charting again. Come on. Get out there.
And get us over for some of, if not the travelling film festivals, but get us out for the permanent. Surely there's a Sydney Film Festival you can fly us out for.
We'll travel
Doesn't
3
matter.
days to go and head over there. But in the meantime, we'll see you next week.
And also a big thank you to our producers, Finn and Dave, as ever, for your support. And don't forget also, James is reviewing Wolfman, another new movie that's out. James just did a sort of thriller-esque Wolfman pose.
Out to the moon.
Check that out on our feed later this week. Guys, movies all the time, all around. See you next week, guys.
Take
Thanks
care,
so
guys.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.